But instead of just retiring and doing nothing, Mr. Jenks went back to school and he got a master's degree in geographic information systems and has since continued to enjoy the neighborhood, spend that time teaching young people. He has thoroughly taught hundreds of students about geographic information systems. Mr. Jenks just gives so freely of his time and loves working with students. He's won awards for his teaching ability. So please welcome Mr. Jenks to the podium to give us his talk on the GIS application and land use model.
Thank you, Joe. We did a count the other day about how many students I've taught. I've been teaching I worked in finance at Joe said for 20 years and retired as a director of the bank. And then went on back to school, and I've been teaching now for 20 years. So it shows how old I am. But we added up the number of students, and it was about 3,100 students that taught semester classes, graduate and undergraduate students, semester level GIS and GPS. So it really was a pretty impressive number. I was really surprised. So what this is the simple thing. I'm part of the Department of Forestry, and I came back to school not because I wanted to teach GIS. I used GIS at the bank, and I used computers, and I was in charge of the information systems for the organization, for the marketing. But I came back because I love trees, and that's my hobby. Trees always been my hobby. So I went to forestry, and when I showed up, I knew about computers, so immediately they found me, and I had to do computer work along with the trees. So my wife says I hang around with trees and maps. Is how she describes what I do. So I'm in forestry, and forestry. The reason we're in forestry teaching GIS, we're not in geography. We have a big geography department at the University of Minnesota, and it's logical to have GIS and geography. What we teach, and we're the big teacher of the required course in GIS, and all of our majors in our college are required to take my class. Maybe that's why I have such big numbers. It's not because I'm great, but you're required to be there. We're teaching applied skills. And what GIS is for us is a type of infrastructure building tool that could be used in all disciplines. As I said, I use GIS at a financial institution. You can use GIS for the state, for the county, for functions. You can use it for business. I'm sure Tata has GIS people doing things for their dealers and all their services and their. So it's not something that's just natural resources. But what we focus on is natural resources, GIS and natural resources, and this utility skill. And we focus on teaching applied skills. So we teach theory, but over half our course is laboratory exercises where the students delineate a watershed. They do a proximity analysis. They do a habitat analysis. They do a site suitability analysis. They would talk about defining stand boundaries and measuring the amount of biomass, that's within a particular stand, and identifying the tree canopy diameter and tree height and those sorts of things. So we're doing applied things. We're teaching students applied skills. And many students, like Sama, our wonderful organizer, came and took my class. She did very well, actually. I'm a very impressive student. But that she came to learn that skill to apply to her work in botany, because the plants appreciate, the plants exist in a location too. So that's really what I want to talk about here. These three topics real quickly. Geographic information systems that we're talking about, how it applies in natural resources. But, and I want to talk about two sort of simple acquisition technology for obtaining location, because we're all about location. And I'll talk about two simple technologies that we'll quickly go through. And we'll arrange a demonstration afterwards, after lunch. We've got a time to show some demonstration on this. Now, the reason we exist is because everything happens somewhere, right? You got up in the morning, you put your feet on the floor, you went to the bathroom, you went to breakfast, right? It was somewhere. You had a little mental map, right, to know where you're going in your hostel or your hotel or your home, right? This happens somewhere. Everything happens somewhere, and so that all of history is taking place in space. And so it's real logical that we're managing that location and revealing that location, and that even so it's that spatial thinking is really, really important, and it's something that only exists because of the computer. If I was here 200 or 300 years ago in a Naga village, and everybody in that village, everybody in the village, at the end of the day, got together in one place, assuming you could do that, right? And they all noted where Andy, that's my name, where Andy was, right? Because there are a million set of eyes, hundreds of set of eyes, right? They would have been able to establish my pattern or my travels that day, right? Now, they didn't do that because it was too hard to do. Nobody did that, for just one person, you know what I mean, or a person. But today, with computer technology, I put a little tracker on me, around it, there I was. It's the computer that enabled that location, you know what I mean, to bring all sorts of information together. And the important components here, if someone asks about GIS, because we use the term a lot, the important thing is that it's collection and organization and maintenance. Okay? We tend to think, oh, there's analysis. We're going to go right to the analysis, or we're going to get answers to things. Well, you don't get answers unless you put in good data and you maintain that good data and you have some organization. And a good organization we were talking about in the walk yesterday was the taxonomy that exists for plant species, the hierarchy, the species and genus, and that organization. And that helps us name and manage, and understand and communicate. That's an important organization in that field. We have the same need in GIS. We need to be organized. Now, we all get to the analysis and the output, okay, but you get the idea. It's all part of that. And most of the work in GIS is data jockey work where you're updating the roads, you're adding things, you're collecting, you're doing a lot of blocking and tackling. Or I was just speaking to the students, and I think the analogy that hit home with them is that in a football game, you're the fullback or the halfback in the football match. You're not the forward, the goalie. Do you know what I mean? You're doing all those utility functions, and that's really where GIS. And that's why we don't have a lot of students do PhDs in GIS. Master's program in GIS, but it's primarily do masters and then you apply it. It's not a higher level. But the two important components, as I mentioned, are what and where. That's what makes GIS unique, is the adding the where. We've all been tracked. I'm sure the chief or a farmer in a village today would be keeping track of how much maize or how much rice would be obtained from that field. And they're keeping track of things, just like when I worked for a bank, we kept track of how much money was in people's accounts. The what. That's something that people are comfortable keeping track of. What's difficult is the where. Is that where that farmer got that rice. It got it from this plant over here, and this plant, and this plant, and this plant. You're getting that idea. And that spatial pattern might have some significance for a project, especially if there's a slope and there's other factors. So it's that what and where. And that's what I was just teaching the students in the geography. If somebody asks about GIS and they don't know much about the academic world, it's about computers that help you what and where. That's sort of the simple thing. Now, GIS is composed of layers. Okay? Now, when you look at the Survey of India, a topo sheet of the Survey of India, you're all familiar with the wonderful topo sheets that they've produced for years. Or the maps that the government of Nagaland produced, or the city of Kohima produced. They combined all these layers together. But in GIS, we keep all these layers separate, these themes separate, so that the roads and the soils are not managed together. We have the roads managed separately from the soils, separately from the wetlands, separately from the elevation and the political, so on. There could be 20 layers here. And if we want to create a flat map to give to the commissioner, There's some policy. We put it together. It's a flat map. It looks like it's all, but you see the idea. We manage them separately so that if we're looking at the roads layer and we're trying to decide the roads in Kohima, some of the roads, as you know, are in better shape than other roads, right? And that, one of the GIS questions would be, which are the worst ones? Where should we devote our attention to repair those roads? So you would be classifying those roads on the roads layer, wouldn't be messing with any of the other layers, and you would be saying where they're in bad repair. You'd have attributes. Remember, it's a what and a where. So you'd have a what there about whether it's gravel or whether it's concrete or whether it's a total problem. Means that it needs a lot of repair. But then you could combine that with the soil layer, right? And to say at that place, the soil layer or the hydrology, the water layer, could be explaining some of that, or the slope layer could be explaining why some of that road is deteriorating faster than you expected. And if somebody had treated the water drainage in that situation, you might have got another 10 years out of that road. Rather than just let the water run over it and it messes everything up and the road's a mess. But you can only tell that by having those separate layers, managing that, and then as your analysis comes together, you would put them together. Does that make sense? That's the key concept in GIS. And it was quite a sort of revolutionary thinking when it came out. And before the computers, you'd put them together with overhead or transparencies or foils. You know what I mean? You remember those from maybe your education days? The teacher would have these transparencies they put over the overhead, and you get the same sort of idea as this. Now, the GIS fundamentals. The GIS, one of the issues with GIS is we can't put the whole world in the computer, okay? And that we need to do some sort of abstraction to get it in the world. So our abstraction would be for tree stands. You know what I mean? We say this group of homogeneous trees, and in Minnesota we have more homogeneous groups of trees rather than you do. But this group of trees would represent an object, and we would then manage that object. Now you could say one of the objects could be a road, you know what I mean, or a building. You get the idea. We have to make some sort of abstraction, and we have to have some sort of data structure, to store that. And the common ones are raster and vector, in some details. So vector being a very common one, just where you draw that with point, line, polygon. Raster being a checkerboard. And in order to represent something on a checkerboard, you turn on and off the squares to make the colors or to make the shapes. Raster is how your television works. 1080p. You have televisions, you bought televisions, you use television, 720p, 1080p, 4K. You've heard of those? That's a raster, and that's a data structure for storing data. Now, we have some terms and things. I won't get into too much of this, but you get the idea. We have entities or real world things, whether it be a road, whether it be a tree, whether it be a farmer, whether it be a particular plot of land, whether it be a water body, or whether it be something like elevation, like slope, that would be an entity, and as we put them into the computer, they become an object. You got to remember, they're all objects in their own homogeneous layer. Okay, so we're not putting the elevation in with the water, right? So you can see how it works. Now, this is an example of one of my students' work. One of my graduate students, she's doing a PhD now in Spain in geography, but not GIS, but in geography. And this is just a little poster that she had prepared. Often my students for their projects, they write papers and they present and have poster sessions, to share their work. But in this particular advanced class, we built a GIS for our campus. So rather than obtaining layers from the city government or from our Department of Natural Resources or the federal government, we said, okay, we're going to build everything from the ground up. So the students went and defined the study area, the campus, and they went and collected the control, the latitude and longitude where everything was, for control at some important point. And then they digitized everything. And they registered the pictures, and registered and started. And most of the work was that building process. And that's the thing to remember about GIS. If you're thinking about GIS for your organization, the analysis is great, but most of the work is in the building, is in the organization, is in the maintenance, is in that blocking and tackling or whatever I'm not sure the right terms for what a fullback or halfback, the movements they do in a football match. I'm not an expert on soccer or football, but the students then went and we actually acquired LiDAR, okay, and we integrated that, and then we did a watershed analysis. Then we did the fun stuff. That's what everybody wants, and we were looking at how the landscape performed with 10 centimeter rainfall, 20 centimeter rainfall, a 30 centimeter rainfall in a 24-hour period. So we had the water, modeled the water depositing in the landscape. What happens when it comes to the landscape? Some of the tree leaves intercept it, right? Runs down the stem sometimes. The tree roots take up some of it, absorbs it, right? Some of it falls on the grassy areas or the vegetation gets absorbed, but some of it runs off when it hits the pavement or the parking lot, the impervious surfaces. You getting the idea? So we were creating factors for each of the data layers to say how much absorption there would be. And we found that at 10 centimeters, the landscape was able to handle it. At 20, it was a toss-up. At 30, we were in trouble, and we had to do some activity. Now, in my advanced course, we go to the point of saying, okay, let's remediate this. Let's put in some more pervious surface. Let's convert parking lots, into places where the pavement is pervious, so that the water can infiltrate. It doesn't run. You're getting the idea. This class we just ended with the outputs. But you get the idea. Soup to nuts. But most of the work is in the building. Now, I want to talk about the acquisition of data. And this particular topic, UAS or drones, for me is a charismatic mega technology, like polar bears, or elephants, or it's a charismatic mega fauna, that it gets all the attention in the media. But from my point of view, UAS is like a top truck. It's just, I want the images. I want to make a map, because the best way to make a map is from the air. The birds have a big advantage for us, because they have that able to get perspective from the air, not impeded by some of the land structures. So what I'm most interested in is getting images, so I can make maps, so I can do analysis, and I can maintain and look at change. But the important things in UAS world that you think about if you're considering this in natural research, and it's popular in natural research, is that it's for very large scale activity. Okay, now large scale. This is a geographer speaking. Okay, large scale is a ratio. Scale in a geography sense is 1 unit on the map is equal to how many units on the ground. Okay? So that's a ratio. So if you have a map of the Coweta Science College, that would be a large scale map. Right? Whereas if I've got a map of Nagaland, that would be a small scale map. I know it's the opposite of what you think. Okay, but so the drones are good for small areas for you. Okay, large scale in our technical term. But that we have because when I fly with a battery in the drone, I'm only flying, and I'll use acres here. I'm flying 100 acres per battery here or something. I'm not flying. Couldn't cover all of a district without quite a number of missions. And in the drone world, it comes from the military, so everything is a mission. And when I go, we'll do a demonstration of deploy. It's all sort of military terms, but we're not doing any military. But the other part of it is the software that controls the plane. We're not flying these things. We're not Xbox or PlayStation. We're not playing around. We're not filming a wedding or tracking somebody on their bicycle, or they're doing some, which you could do with these. And that's where a lot of the use is for that recreational. You're on vacation and you want a cute picture, of your family at the recreational place. The software is controlling it. We're creating a program, and the program is put under this robot, and the robot does its job. Comes back and gives me the picture. And the pictures are what I want. If I want to make the map. But there's also software. So it's something you want to think about. It's acquiring that, and we didn't, when I started in the GIS and remote sensing, we didn't fly the satellites. We didn't fly the airplanes. You know, we just use it. Now we're getting into actually the operation and the acquisition of that. The Indian Space Agency flies the Indian satellites. So it's a, you know, you're sort of stepping into a role with some new skills. And in processing that you have to pay for. Somebody's got to put those pictures together and talk about that. Now, cost-wise, I sort of guessed. Now, I'm not sure if I represented rupees, but in U.S. it's $1,200 US dollars. You know, we're spending maybe $100 US or something like that, $120 a month for processing. Only the months you use it. You know, so it's not. This is not ridiculous money. The people that do it need to get trained. There's laws. We told the police what we're going to do for the demonstration, so we don't get in trouble. You have to fly up to 400 feet because you don't bump into an airplane. You know, I mean, you get licensed to do this. It's not a big deal. It's a pilot. The vendor we use, the leading vendor, they own about 75–80% of the U.S. market, is a Chinese vendor, very, very good Chinese vendor, DJI. It's named after the founder's initials. They make very good products. It's there's inexpensive versions. But these are the products we use and I'm talking about here. There's also a software that you can put on your computer that you can pay for, but then you have to have a fancy computer. The easy way is to take the pictures, push them up to the web, and they do the processing on their special servers. You know what I mean? Give you the results. You know, and it's a much more sort of cheap and delicious way to do it. That you would pay a fee, you know, per month for the months you do that type of service. So there's ways to work. But the thing that I've just mentioned was I talked about fancy computers to run this, or pretty good broadband, right, to get the data up and back. So none of this weak Wi-Fi and older computers. You know, this is using, and that's been true with GIS. The new model of the new software of Esri, which is what we teach with ArcGIS, is tightly integrated with the web. And so some of the problems we're having with the students in class is the latency in the computer network causes some processing problems because the files are on a server somewhere and it's taking a couple of nanoseconds longer, you know what I mean, to feed it. So if you're on some weak Wi-Fi with some limited, forget it. You know what I mean? This is a connected sort of technology we're talking about. Now, what happens in the U.S.? They essentially I create a mission, and the software, that drone deploy software, lets you create the little mission. And I just draw the box, and I tell it these are where the pictures are going to be taken. And I tell it the image width and the image overlap, the end lap, side lap is what we call them. And the idea is that we're trying to take pictures so that every object, every blade of grass, okay, every tree, every leaf, okay, is in at least 5 pictures, hopefully more if we can. Okay, so tremendous overlap of these pictures. And you can fly sideways, back and forth, densify depending on your needs. And your elevation determines your pixel size. You know what I mean? If you're trying to show a lot of information, you fly as close to the ground as you can get away with, but then you're covering less territory. So we tend to fly as high as we can so that an entire tree might be in one scene, you know, one particular picture. You know what I mean? So we're not piecing things together as much. But now this is a picture of a plan for a fixed wing, because some of the technology is fixed wing. The problem with the fixed wing is you got to take off. You got to have a takeoff. You got to have a landing area. It's better for battery though, because it just has one propeller. It's using the lift properties of the wings, you know, of the airplane to fly a better distance. We're flying, and I'll get that out here. We're flying a quadcopter with 4, you know, blades that spin that you can launch vertically and operate. Now, this is a particular mission, and it's a little hard to see with the light, but I've got the actual flight plan after we operated that mission. And we're taking the pictures of the green dots, and we have the purple there, you can't really see it very well, sorry, is where the plane went. And I was standing here, I took off, and it went without taking a picture from the start, and on its own little timer, distance time, it's got GPS, knows where it is, a little robot. I've named my aircraft because I'm sort of cheering for them when they're here. Because they're up there operating on their own, and if the wind's blowing them and stuff, I start, oh, come on. And, it's it's sort of an interesting experience, and I've had 500 or 600 flights and missions, many hours, and it's and I'm nervous every time. Yeah. But so anyway, so we then process these. We take these pictures back, and this is an example of one of the pictures. And my office is up. This is here's my office here. And you'll notice this particular picture was centered here. So the picture is tilted out. The real accurate part of this picture is right here, the nadir, the center of the picture. So you see some of the issues when we put them together. We want when we finish product, we want the top of the building everywhere to be over the bottom of the building, not tilted. Okay, that's the problem we're trying to get rid of. We get all these pictures. In this case, we get 48 for our little area for the school. These are the photo centers where the photos were. We've also got some green here about ground control. I can talk about where our GPS stops for to improve the accuracy. But I've got some basic steps, and you could read through this at your when it's on the notes if you want to read through the exact steps. Basically, what happens is that this is a football goal. You're familiar with the football goal, right? This is the football goal that's in the same picture, 4 pictures. I only showed 4. I didn't show 5 or 6. There's a lot of pictures. But this was in the center of this picture, so I showed it. But this particular corner is the same as that corner up there with the purple. It's the same as that corner in a different orientation, right? Because the plane was going this way and that way and backward. So I'm getting all the different angles. The other dot is just showing my ground control. When I put ground control out, I put little markers out that I can see in the picture that I have the known GPS location, so I can improve the accuracy. So from that, we create a sparse point cloud or array cloud, so that those pictures, those 48 pictures, we know where they are in GPS space, but with the details we have from the matching of those tie points, those 10% of the tie points, that we know how to tilting. So it's just like the cones in your eyes. We know the distance between the cones, your eyeballs or the cones on an eye, that are helping you with that 3D perspective. So we can locate these in exact 3D space, not just horizontally and vertically, but also with the tilting. And although there's gimbal on the plane to keep it straight, but it lets us then create, finish this process to create a point cloud. Now, when you're Mosaic in traditional GIS, remote sensing, you would take a satellite imagery from Google, and you take another satellite imagery, say one's from Mizram and one's from Nagaland, or from Assam, and you would mosaic them by stitching them together where they adjoin, right? And you would edge match. Here we're taking all the dots from all the pictures, and we're creating a point cloud, and then we're reassembling that. You're getting the idea. So it's much more complicated, and that's why it's a pretty fancy computer operation. It's good to hire somebody for $100 a month to do it, and there are unlimited number of times you can use it. You know what I mean? That much. It's not a bad deal if you manage your time. So it creates this point cloud, and this is what it looks like. Now, I could improve this point cloud for the sideways, the 3D, if I was flying, combining it with oblique angle pictures. You know what I mean, as well as the top. But I'm just concerned about making a map, because this is the product I want. Is the ortho mosaic. So now I know exactly where I can map the sidewalk, I can map the playing field, I can map the parking meters, I can, everything, I can make a nice map. And remember, everything goes in its own layer. We're going to put the parking meters in with the parking spaces. You know what I mean? And they're different objects. So you get the basic idea. We also produce some other products, which would be a digital terrain model. And this is not LiDAR, okay? Because LiDAR would actually go through, it's active remote sensing, would go through the canopy. A certain percentage of the laser goes through the canopy, and you can see the bare ground. And that's what we use the LiDAR to create that bare ground model. This is a terrain model. So it's pretty close. But it's a nice 3D surface that comes out of the product. It's another product that could be used. And so that's that. Now, what I wanted to talk about quickly, because I just got a second, is GPS. Now, GPS should not be called GPS. GPS is equivalent to calling every soft drink in the world Coca-Cola. Does that make sense? Doesn't make any sense. There are all sorts of different soft drinks. It doesn't make sense to call everything Coca-Cola. But GPS was a system that the U.S. invented in the 70s. They called it Navstar GPS. The U.S. invented it, and and the U.S. military invented it for military purposes. But they provided it free to the world, and had good world coverage, and so everybody used it. And so we use the GPS. But we really should be calling it Global Navigation Satellite System, because the Indian government has a satellite system. The Chinese have a satellite navigation. The Russians and the Europeans have a satellite system, and they're all the same as the U.S. system. They're flying roughly the same orbit. They operate pretty much the same, and they're all providing service free, so you get your position. What they do is they provide PNT, position, navigation, and timing. That's what that's all they do. And if somebody says to me, GPS told me to turn, the GPS told me to do this, GPS, wrong. The electronic map told you to do this. The GPS just gave you the X, Y, and Z, your spot. The map is what's wrong. So now there are all the different countries. Now, why did the other countries do it? The U.S. had? Well, some people worry about the U.S. not behaving so well, and so they want their own system in case the U.S. doesn't behave so well. You get the idea that might be an idea. So they've got systems, but it's the same sort of idea. It operates the same sort of way. And when you're acquiring GPS positions, you can use one from the U.S., one from the Russians, one from the Chinese, and if you have a Samsung phone, it's using the Navstar as well as the Galileo, the GLONASS, and the Chinese. The Apple doesn't get into the Chinese yet, and I'm not sure which ones use the Indian system. It's a regional, and I'm sure put Japan up there because they have a regional navigation. Now these are flying clocks, and they've changed the world in clocks because that it provides free down to the nanosecond time worldwide. So everybody, every elevator, every stock market, every business, every phone system, everything. Everybody in this room woke up to GPS time. Now, you woke up. I didn't wake up to GPS time. You woke up with anything that wasn't a wind-up clock. Okay, maybe if you had a wind-up clock, you didn't wake up to GPS. You woke up to the time. So the time is there. It's the atomic clocks they built after the Second World War. You know what I mean? That have this precise time. And they send out. They operate in the mid-Earth orbit. They're not up where the geostationary satellites are for the television. They're not down by where the space station is, or some of the Landsat, some of the imaging satellites. They're up in mid-Earth orbit, and all the Chinese and the U.S. are all in the same rough place, but the orbits are going different directions. Okay, so they have several vehicles in each orbit, sort of chasing each other, and they're going about 9,000 miles an hour. You know what I mean? So they're moving very, very fast. And in fact, the speed at which they're going helps prove Einstein's special theory of relativity. As you're approaching the speed of light, time changes, right? And the difference between the clock in space and the clock on the Earth proved his general relativity theory. So all of Einstein's calculations for those two theories had to be programmed into GPS to get it to work. If it didn't, you'd be off by 90 miles. You know what I mean? The timing would be that far off. Does that make sense? So it's sort of cool. We talked about Einstein here at the Einstein. But how this works, it's all trilateralation. It's not angles. This is not like a land survey. I got an angle of that building, that steeple. I got an angle of that mountain. I got an angle. Okay, it's trilateralation. It's distance. So I receive the signal from the satellite, and we know when it's sent. I know when I got it. Okay, so I know how long it took. The speed of light is constant. I can figure the distance. So it's 20,000 kilometers from this. 19,100 from this. You get the idea? And if I can locate myself on 4 of those spheres, 4 satellites, I can find that spot. Now, 3 is all you actually need to have an intersection, but the 4th is for timing. Now, in truth, the GPS uses every satellite it can. Most of your phones would use 20 or 25 satellites. You know what I mean? To get a position, but you need at least 4. To get a bit. But it's all distance from the satellite. And the satellites are flying around in an orbit, and like I say, 9,000 miles an hour. I get to transfer that to kilometers per hour. But they're in known locations. So the Indian system or the Chinese system, they know within centimeters where these satellites are, 20,000 kilometers up. This is rocket science. I mean, this is serious stuff. This is why the space division flies and operates this. And from these known positions, you're able to then calculate the unknown position. Does that make sense? So that the known position of the satellite derives the unknown position. Now, the other one that we talked about is DGPS, differential GPS. It came up a number of times with people talking about it. Now, that's 2 things. And And what I'd suggest that Nagaland consider if we're going to be using TGPS is that you would take, because it requires 2 receivers. And what happens is that if you're at one of the benchmarks over in the War Memorial, they got benchmarks. Or there's some benchmarks. You've really Survey of India benchmarks. You've seen the brass plates. That if you're operating that place and you collect GPS, that you would have a you would know where you are from the surveyors, right down to the centimeters, millimeters. Down very accurate. And the GPS tells you you're off to the southeast by a meter. That's the error in the ionosphere, because the signals are going through the Van Allen belt. You know what I mean? They're going through that outer disturbance. It's not clouds and atmosphere that bother GPS. It's that outer that bounce. So you're able to see it's off. So you could tell, either real time or post process, you could tell the person out collecting the road information about where the broken road is, or the pipe, or the tree, or the particular recreational feature. You could tell them that, hey, move your point from where you're standing, a little bit, to that direction, that correction. Make sense? But it requires 2 things. Now, what the U.S. does, and then you might get to if you work on this, is that you would set up a little house over that benchmark point. And that little house would have a computer in it that would constantly collect the position, and then broadcast it on the internet. So rovers, in the various districts or the state or the businesses, could use that correction. Does that make any sense? What happens today, I'm talking with Dr. Hesse, they do differential by actually setting up their own little station over the benchmark. Do you know what I mean? And then babysitting. Maybe you've seen surveyors with a tripod there, sitting there, and nobody's there, or somebody sitting there protecting it from being that. That's the reference station, that's getting it correct. Does that make sense? Now, I'm talking about, I'm not sure where we are in the time, but we're out of time. Okay. But I'm happy that we can talk more about horizontal accuracy. But the last thing to mention is that the technology is changing so fast, just so fast. It is really amazing. And you want to, where this fits for you and where you could integrate this into your business. But there's a Chinese manufacturer of cell phone that just came out, Xiaomi. Xiaomi. Have any of you seen the Xiaomi Android phone? The new one, the M5, I think is what it's called. It has the GPS chip in it. It can be accurate within 30 centimeters. And that's because the satellites are adding more signals, the chips are getting better. And so now what's happening with these GPS points, our GPS is more accurate than our maps. So if you see the blue dot, and we'll go, and it's not where the picture says it is, the picture's wrong. Not the blue dot. You're getting the idea. And you see the sort of the problems for most people doesn't matter. Okay, so that does that make sense? Give you a little idea of 2 technologies and how the US works. Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'm sure you probably have lots of questions, James. You need to stay on time and mention after the break. And we'll stay on time. So, in the remainder of our session, we've got 2 speakers that are going to be kind of working together. So up is Dr. Preston. She has a background in plant molecular biology and biotechnology. She's working as advisor, agricultural advisor, state coordinator, GIZ program. So Dr. Preston, if you want to come up, and then she will also then introduce our second speaker, Dr. Peter Gross.
Thank you for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. I think we've been flying high for the past half an hour, so let me take you back to the ground, to rural technology. Today, I represent GIZ, which is a German agency funded by the government of Germany. And I just want to give you an insight on the German GIZ activities in Nagaland. And I just hope that this insight will give an sight into what kind of research focus area that we need to look at, and what actions that we need to do, and what kind of implementation that we need to address. So this is just an overview. GIZ in India, we are into technical cooperation with the government of India, and we have been in India for the past 60 plus years. And there are three key focal areas that we are focusing on, that is environment, energy, and sustainable economic development. So under environment, we have this project called climate change adaptation in northeastern region, and I have to use this, right? And we have a presence in 4 states of northeastern region, that is Meghalaya, Mizoram, Sikkim, and Nagaland. The goal is to enhance the adaptive capacity of the rural people in the face of climate change. And to achieve this goal, we have 2 objectives, that is to facilitate the government and institutions in applying the climate change adaptation policies and strategies, and develop human capacities and institution capacities. So I'm going to talk about only Nagaland experience. These are the 4 major highlights that we have been doing over the past 6 years, since 2012. That is the drafting of policies and action plan at the government level, indigenous rights development, organic value chain development, and capacity building. Under this drafting of policy, for the past few years, we have facilitated government in drafting the state action plan for climate change and water policy. And this has been done with a consultative process to identify strategies and action plan. And we have kept in mind the diversity of the Naga traditional practices and Nagaland June Land Act while drafting these policies. And through this exercise, we have brought together 25 government departments into this exercise, and a number of research areas has been identified, especially with the state action plan and climate change, to address the climate change adaptation measures. Now in the pipeline, we got Nagaland government trying to make Nagaland as one of the major hubs of organic agriculture. We are helping the government in drafting the state organic policy and reviewing the existing Nagaland biodiversity strategy and action plan, which was drafted in 2005, and modification of People's Biodiversity Register format. Now, when we talk about Nagaland, the staple food is rice, and we all know that Nagaland, we are very rich in rice resource. And Nagaland government, they have already identified 800 plus varieties and land races. But then there are 3 main questions that arose, which is how will climate change affect the rice production, how to increase the production, and what kind of rice production system will be in the future in the face of climate change. So to address these 3 questions, GIZ, what we have done in a very small way, we did an exercise with these farmers. We went back to the farmers because they are the traditional knowledge holders. And we did a seed exchange and rice breeding exercise with an aim to increase the seed variety within the village, so that to ensure the crop security within the village, and to enable the farmers to adapt to the climate variabilities, and as well as it may increase the yields and stabilize the yield. So this was done in 4 villages, 48 farmers participated, 42 rice land races were exchanged, and not only rice, but some other crops like pulses, legumes, it was also exchanged. And the result was, we did a small exercise with the farmers only. This was not a very deep, extensive research. This was a field-based experience, and the germination percentage was 76% as compared to the existing varieties within the village. And when we look at the yield of the introduced varieties as compared to the existing varieties, we found that at 75% they showed similar kind of yield, and 5% it did much more better. So with this experience, we learned that introduced seed varieties can adapt to the change in altitude and soil. And one of the concerns that we could find out was the different sowing time from village to village, because we have a lot broad geographical differences. The second exercise was the farmer-led breeding, and why we did this exercise was we wanted to maybe attempt to create a new variety which is tailor-made for by the farmer itself, not by the scientists. So we trained 10 farmers from 3 villages, and they produced 37 F1 generation breeds. And this reiterated the point that we can train the farmers to do in situ breeding so that they can breed new varieties which is climate resilient. Another intervention was to see at water accessibility to increase the rice production. And this exercise was done in collaboration with the farmers, and they wanted to we done this water harvesting ponds, irrigation pipes, and diversion wells. And the output was over and above the increase in yield. Uh, they constructed 2 fishery ponds. They started doing fish rearing in the water harvesting pond. And one farmer, he recultivated the field that he abandoned 5 years ago. Another area that we were looking at after a series of scoping study that we did over the years, we found out some gaps in organic value chain development. So to bridge this gap, we did a series of workshops and trainings for capacity building, and we did this value links introductory seminar to empower the government officials on how to plan and implement value chain promotion projects. And we taught the small time entrepreneurs on fruit drying technology and the farmers producers organization on market access and marketing training. And now we are in the pipeline to, in collaboration with the agriculture department, we are in the pipeline to profile 20 indigenous rice species, which are climate resilient, which are high yielding varieties, and which has aromatic. So this is in the pipeline. We have another small area called capacity building, and since government of Nagaland, they have planned to stop procuring seeds from outside because these are all inorganic seeds, or these are all high yielding varieties which doesn't do well in our state. So we saw the need to build the capacities of the rural people in establishing community seed bank. And this training was done, and if this, sorry. And this picture that you see is one community seed bank that was established in Chizame village. Next is to empower the traditional knowledge holders, especially the women. We conducted a training which is participatory video project. Here we train the farmers on how to use video cameras, not only the video cameras, but how to identify an issue, how to do script writing, how to make films. And through this training, the farmers, they learned how to make films, and it was kind of a platform to exchange the traditional knowledge, and it was a time for them to document their traditional knowledge. And through this training, they came up with 2 short films, which is based on ecosystem services, biodiversity, and climate change activities. Here I finished my talk, and the next talk will be presented by my project director, GIZ. Let me take the opportunity to introduce him. He's Dr. Peter Gross, project director, GIZ, and he was an assistant professor in forestry in the University of Freiburg, and he has worked with forest administration, German government, and then he has 25 plus years experience in land use planning and management of natural resources and conservation strategies, and 30 plus years in application of remote sensing in forestry.
Thank you, Cressida. I saw it coming. Last speaker before lunch break. Time is already run out already at the beginning of my speech. So then I come with all my statistics, graphs, and box plots. So I will never be invited again. So we can also start directly with a question. answer session. And if you want to know something about GIZ, what we are doing here. And I can also give just some slides on one very specific aspect of our work, which does not focus on Nagaland but on Mizoram, but conditions are comparable, and I think takeaway messages are the same. And I have only 7 takeaway messages for you in the course of my presentation, worth to be noted down. Yes. Regarding these takeaway messages, I think I have not the time to elaborate on the proofs which exist, but I will just give them to you more like a thesis and statement, and will elaborate very little on the proof. So what you see here is our project area in Mizoram. It is a project area for a project called Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services in Agrarian Landscapes. What you see is the landscape. So the landscape is our study object. We're not looking on a single field, but on quite a big chunk of land. Our study object is about 70 square kilometers in size, and it's located southwest of Aizawl, capital of Mizoram. Now, what strikes out here is that you see forest. It is a forest landscape that you see here. Only when focusing, and this is also proved by this small, the only statistic I have. So Mizoram has 90% forest recorded, forest survey. Also other northeastern states, 78, 77, 76. So quite high percentage of the land is forest in these states. Only when we zoom in, we see it's not only forest. It's a pattern of different land use mosaic. That is what we call slash and burn in general. In northeastern region, it is called Jum. You find this kind of agricultural practice all over this area here, in the hilly regions, not only in India. You find it in neighboring countries, in Laos, in Vietnam, southern China. It is very typical for this area of the world and also for other tropical and subtropical regions of the world. Well, it is depicted as a main driver of erosion, deforestation, air pollution, and rural poverty in general. We heard this argument also in the morning. Actually, if you look a little bit closer to this pattern, it's very, very well adapted, this kind of agricultural practice, to the geography, where our climate is the monsoon climate. And this kind of practice over thousands of years fed the people in the region in a sustainable way. So we call it more rotational agroforestry than slash, because you see different stages of succession. In our area, cropping phase is only 1 year. After 1 year, it's going to be fallow phase again. And you see different type of fallow phases. You see June fields under cultivation. You also see very freshly burnt June. It is a man-made cultural landscape, like we have it in Europe. We have no more natural landscapes at all. Not one is left. All man-made cultural landscape, which is a value. We in Germany, we keep this, we try to conserve these landscapes by putting money, by giving farmers or employing people to keep, like if you would employ people to keep this Juving cycle alive in the Northeast. So the first 2 takeaway messages are this mosaic of different land uses always has more higher biodiversity as just one single land use, even compared to primary forest. This mosaic has a higher biodiversity. This is due to these border effects of the different heights and other factors. And secondly, rotational agroforestry conserves forests, not virgin forests. I'm not speaking about virgin forests, but forests as land use. It conserves because it's an important step in the cycle for the farmers to re-fertilize their land. Without forest phase, they would not be able to produce anything. So they have to look after this fallow phase, and they do. Plus, dooming is in general always in connection with sacred forests or conserved forests, where no dooming is allowed under the control of the village. So the villagers know very well that some ecosystem services they need, like water, pollination, is coming from the protected forest. And they keep it protected. No doing allowed there. So this is this mosaic of primary forest and rotational agroforest. In the June field itself, the crop variety is very high. In our case, we do some baseline studies, a lot of research already now. We have 54 different vegetable crops grown in 3 villages, which we are working in. Very high variety in crops. Also staple food, rice, which is also grown on June fields, sometimes June fields which are far away from the villages. And we have 5 rice species in that area. We identified 5 rice species. So what we can conclude is that crop variety in June fields is high, higher than in any settled agricultural areas. And gene variety, like rice, is also high because you find different species and different gene compositions of rice in the same area, like Cressida told us before. What does it mean for people? Whenever they go to the June field, they find something to harvest. All over the cycle of the vegetation period. Different things, starting from mushrooms maybe, ending up with maize and rice. They always bring something back. Self-sustenance cooking, which is of high nutritional value, what they have. Great variety, high nutritional value, no fertilizer used, no pesticides used, so it's healthy what people harvest from their June field. Not only this, part of their harvest, part of their produce, they can also sell it. They bring it to the market. This is preparation for the market. So the next 2 takeaways, or 3, is doing provide. Nowadays we say slow food. This provides locally produced, diversified, healthy food. This is a big movement in the Western world to go for slow food. Here it is daily practice. It makes people independent and resilient, independent even from governmental schemes, because they are independent, they're resilient against change, hunger, starving, everything. Finally, organic food has a market value. You cannot realize it maybe in Nagaland at the moment. They cannot realize it in Mizoram, but it has a value. Western world, they pay a lot of money this will also reach India. And then you should be ready to produce for that market, because then you are in a niche market and you can realize high value, high market values for the producers. To come back to Andy, to remote sensing and GIS, thank you for that. We are of course also working with remote sensing and GIS. That is what we have a small remote sensing lab in our office. What you see here, but I don't see very clearly, different ownerships in our 3 villages: common land, private land. Private land increases at the moment due to national scheme, but there's still common land, protected forest, riverine protected forest. So we use this tool, like Andy said, for our daily basis, for taking decisions based on facts that we create, and that we don't rely to official sources. Maybe for our young colleagues over there, Andy explained GIS is this layer system. It's outdated. We don't use it anymore. We have now relational databases. But just for you, that is the technical development, which is very fast in this field of research and application. So not only do we have still this common land, a lot of June is common land and is governed by communities, by the villagers. It is also part of people's culture. All festivals, most of the gatherings are related to the June cycle, like feeding, where you invite your neighbors for feeding in your field, and in the afternoon and evening you have some facilities. So it's rooted very deeply in the culture of the people. So my last takeaway message would be: commonly governed land strengthen communities, especially in these modern times. So that was the romantic part of my speech, the more sentimental one. Yeah? Now, how do we deal with the modern challenges? Challenges of development, transition in modern society, needs of young people. Are they still ready to go 7 kilometers to the June field, to work the whole day, come back in the evening with 2 or 3 pumpkins? Threats to traditional society, threats to traditional farming systems. So that's a lot more to talk about. But this is what I will not address today. That is more for a second speech, or even for a workshop, 1 or 2 days. One thing is, we very often hear that development means increasing yield, increasing productivity, all this increasing. The country with the highest productivity of vegetables in the world per square kilometer and also per capita is the Netherlands. And this is a picture of the Netherlands. It is when I fly with airplane towards Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, landing phase, you have this kind of impression. Now you see where this high productivity comes from and what kind of cultural landscape it creates. So thank you for your patience.
So, Dr. Kressler, can you put that here and we'll take questions?